Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Great Books in 10 Minutes. By the end of this episode, you will know all that you need about one of the most famous Christmas stories of all time, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. The idea of writing a new Christmas story became appealing to Charles Dickens when he visited establishments for London's street children in 1843. At the time, the British people were reimagining their old Christmas traditions, and they were getting warmer towards newer ideas, such as Christmas cards and Christmas trees. And Charles Dickens believed that in the reevaluation of those traditions, there should be a higher priority placed on helping our fellow man in need and taking care of each other. So he wrote a beautiful story about the hope for a selfish man to redeem himself by transforming into a more sympathetic person and the positive effect of that transformation on the lives of every single person around him. When A Christmas Carol was first published on December 19, 1843, the first edition of it was sold out by Christmas Eve, and by the end of 1844, a whopping 13 editions of the book had been printed out. The book became so popular that Charles Dickens began public readings of the story. Those performances became so popular that the author himself undertook 127 more performances, and this tradition continued until the end of his life. Since its first edition, A Christmas Carol has never been out of print, and it has been translated into many languages. The book has also been adapted for stage, film, opera, and animation numerous times. The main themes of A Christmas Carol are redemption, time, family, greed, forgiveness, generosity, injustice, and poverty. The story of A Christmas Carol starts on a cold Christmas Eve in London, where a stingy old man named Ebenezer Scrooge sits all grumpy and miserable in his counting house. His business partner, Jacob Marley, has died 7 years ago on Christmas Eve, and since then Ebenezer has been running the business on his own. His clerk, a good-natured family man named Bob Cratchit, shivers from cold because his boss, Mr. Scrooge, refuses to waste money on coal. Scrooge doesn't believe in the merriment of the season and sees the people who celebrate it as fools. At this moment, Scrooge's nephew, Fred, arrives at his uncle's establishment and invites him to his Christmas party. Ebenezer refuses the invite and scolds his nephew for being poor and indebted. Next, two gentlemen walk in on behalf of a charity and ask for Mr. Scrooge's contribution. Ebenezer bitterly rejects them without paying them a penny and tells them that poor people deserve to be in prisons and union workhouses, and that he supports those establishments. When one of the men replies that many poor people rather die than go to those places, Scrooge answers that then they better die and reduce the surplus population. The two men, seeing that it is pointless to continue this argument with Mr. Scrooge, leave while baffled by the extent of his meanness. At the end of the workday, Ebenezer grudgingly allows his clerk Bob to have the Christmas day off with pay to attend to his family. Scrooge still lives in his deceased partner's old house. When he arrives home and wants to open the door, he sees Jacob Marley's face instead of the knocker. For a moment, blood freezes in his veins and he cannot process what he is seeing. After a few seconds, he sees the knocker again and hastily opens the door. Ebenezer lights up a weak fire in the fireplace and sits next to it. Around the fireplace, some tiles are adorned with painted figures from the scripture, and yet under the shimmering light of the fire, all Ebenezer can see on the tiles is the face of his partner, Jacob Marley. Mr. Scrooge stands up angrily and walks a few times around the room. Then he sits down again. This time, as he throws his head back in the chair, his eyes land on a rusty old bell that has been there from the old days. To Ebenezer's horror, the bell begins to swing. Suddenly, all the bells in the house start to ring for about a minute, and then they all stop. Next, a clanking noise echoes in the house, as if someone is dragging heavy chains on the floor and coming closer to the room. Suddenly, the ghost of Jacob Marley appears through the door and passes into the room before Ebenezer's terrified eyes. Mr. Scrooge looks upon his dead colleague's transparent ghost and sees heavy chains around his waist, all made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, and heavy purses. Jacob Marley reveals to Scrooge that this awful situation is the punishment for his greed in life, and that the chains that he carries now were all forged by him. Then he tells his old friend that there might still be time for him to avoid the same fate, or his chains will be even heavier since he has lived a longer life than him and has been adding to it every day. Jacob Marley tells Scrooge that he will be haunted by 3 spirits in the next 3 nights, and without their help, it will be impossible for Ebenezer to shun the same destiny as his friend. When the ghost exits through the window, Scrooge looks outside and sees thousands of phantoms, all carrying heavy chains like his friend Jacob Marley, wailing and lamenting for a chance to return to the world and interfere for good in human matters. At 1 in the morning, the first spirit appears to Ebenezer in the strange form of an old man with a child's face, and introduces itself to him as the ghost of Christmas past. The spirit then grabs Ebenezer by his arm and takes him to his childhood town. There, Ebenezer revisits his memories. He sees his classmates again and becomes emotional upon reliving his childhood. Then they visit a memory from one of Scrooge's past Christmases, when, neglected by everyone, he was sitting alone by himself in a cold classroom, reading a book. Then the atmosphere in the room changes and everything becomes a few years older. Scrooge sees himself older but still alone. Suddenly his younger sister walks into the room bringing the joyful news that she has asked their father to bring Ebenezer home from school and never send him back again, and he has agreed. When Scrooge sees his sister again, who is now dead, becomes emotional. The spirit indirectly reminds him that the nephew that he neglects and despises so much is the son of the same sister. Then the spirit takes Ebenezer to a place where he used to work for a man named Fezziwig. Scrooge recalls and sees how his former boss closed down his business and turned his workshop into a ballroom for everyone to celebrate Christmas. At this moment, and by remembering how kind and generous his boss was to him, he admits that he wishes to say a few words to his clerk, Bob. The shadows of this memory fade too, and Ebenezer this time sees himself at the prime of his life with his fiancée Belle. The girl argues with him that he is no longer the man that she once loved, and that he has replaced her love with his desire to gain money. Belle then asks Ebenezer if they had just met today, would Ebenezer still seek her out and try to win her, knowing that she has no dowry. Then she breaks off their engagement and leaves. Scrooge begs the spirit to not show him anything more, but the spirit forces him to see one more thing and takes him to Belle's house a few years in the future, where she is happy with a caring husband and healthy children. There, her husband mentions that he has walked past Mr. Scrooge's business and he was as lonely and miserable as one could be. At this point, Scrooge angrily tries to get rid of the spirit by putting an extinguisher cap on it, which doesn't work and makes the light of the spirit shine even brighter. When Scrooge wakes up in his room, it is again 1 in the morning. A few hours pass and he anxiously awaits the arrival of the new ghost. Suddenly he sees a ghostly light shining from the adjoining room and someone calling him by his name. Ebenezer goes to the other room and meets the new spirit, who introduces itself as the ghost of Christmas present. Scrooge tells the ghost that last night he learned a great deal from the other spirit and that if he has anything to teach him, he is willing to listen. The spirit takes Scrooge to the home of his clerk, Bob Cratchit. There he witnesses that despite being poor, how happy his family are and how much they love one another. Then he discovers that Bob's youngest son, Tiny Tim, is crippled and could die if his circumstances don't improve. Next, the spirit takes Scrooge to many destinations, and everywhere they visit, it spreads happiness and blesses people who have kept Christmas merry and showed kindness to one another. At one of their stops, they end up in the house of Scrooge's nephew, who is hosting a Christmas party. There, Scrooge witnesses his nephew proposing a toast to his health and wishing him well, despite him refusing his invites. As the night passes, Scrooge realizes that the spirit has become older. The ghost tells him that its life on this globe is very short and it will be over by midnight. Suddenly, Ebenezer sees a claw under the ghost's robe and asks the spirit about it. The spirit shows him two children, a disfigured boy and a girl, and tells him that they are man's children. The boy's name is Ignorance, and the girl's name is Want. Scrooge then asks if they have no resources. The spirit replies to him with his own words that he spoke to the two gentlemen who were trying to secure his help for charity. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Right at this time, the clock strikes midnight and the ghost of Christmas present disappears in an instant. Next, a phantom-like spirit, hooded and draped in black, arrives and moves towards Scrooge like a mist. Ebenezer asks the spirit if it is in fact the ghost of Christmas is yet to come. When he hears no reply, he says that he is afraid of this spirit more than the other two, but he is ready to see what it is about to show him, for he wants to become a better man than he was before. The spirit takes Scrooge to the city, where a few merchants and business acquaintances of his discuss the death of an unnamed rich man in a relaxed and joking manner and show little regret towards his demise. Next, they visit a poor neighborhood in the city, where some maids and launderers are selling a dead person's personal items. Scrooge observes as they talk unkindly towards the dead man and boast about plundering him after his death. Then the spirit takes him to a room where a dead body is covered under a sheet. The spirit points at the dead body and orders Scrooge to uncover it. Scrooge, who by now knows that the person under the cover is himself, does not have the courage to do it and begs the ghost to show him if there is anyone in the world that has any feeling about that person's death. The spirit takes Ebenezer to a young couple's house who owe a large sum of money to Scrooge. When the young man tells his wife that Scrooge is dead, they are both relieved. Next, the spirit takes Scrooge to his clerk Bob's house again. It is a few years in the future, and their son Tiny Tim has passed. Cratchit tells his family about the kindness that Scrooge's nephew has shown him, and reminds his family that they should always remember Tiny Tim's patience and big heart, and never forget each other or be unkind towards one another over mundane things. Then the spirit takes Scrooge to a cemetery, where he sees his own grave and realizes for sure that the dead man was himself all along. Scrooge begs the ghost to tell him if these were the shadows of things that will be, or the shadows of things that might be if the circumstances surrounding those events won't change. The spirit doesn't reply, but Scrooge insists and says that he is now a changed man and begs again for the spirit to show him a sign that there is still time for him to be better and change things. At this moment, seeing Scrooge's sincerity, the ghost's hand shakes, and from its trembling, Scrooge realizes that the spirit pities him and there is still time to make amends for all of his shortcomings. Next, Mr. Scrooge wakes up in his bed, thankful to the three ghosts and his old friend Jacob Marley. He promises himself that he will live in the past, the present, and the future, and the spirits of all three Christmases shall strive within him. Then he opens the window and asks a boy in the street what day is it. The boy replies that it is Christmas Day. Scrooge realizes that all three of the visitations had happened over one night. Happy and grateful that he has not missed Christmas, he asks the boy to go and buy the prized turkey from the poulterers for him to send to his clerk's house. After shaving and dressing up in his best outfit, Ebenezer goes out and with a new attitude greets people with kindness. While he's out, he sees one of the men from charity and this time treats him with respect and apologizes for his bad behavior the other day. Then he pledges a generous amount to charity. After spending the entire day outside and enjoying the simplest aspects of life that could offer so much happiness, Scrooge goes to his nephew's house, where his nephew receives him warmly and he has a great time with his family and friends. The next morning, to his clerk's surprise, Mr. Scrooge raises his salary and promises to help his struggling family in any way that he could. In the following years, Mr. Scrooge becomes the best man that he could possibly be. With his help, Tiny Tim survives his illness, and Scrooge becomes famous for celebrating Christmas and charity, and forever is remembered as a compassionate and generous man. Very well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed my summary of A Christmas Carol. Please consider subscribing to my channel, and see you in the next video.